G'day everybody, welcome to Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation. My name's Chris Gambian, I'm the Chief Executive of the Nature Conservation Council. Sorry about some of those technical hitches we've just had in the last few minutes. You're going to find this very surprising, but we are not in fact a TV studio.
It's true, I know it looks like it.
Very professional.
We're actually in the NCC
amazing.
office.
Yeah, we are just normal people, actually. You wouldn't believe it. Thanks so much for joining us for the start of our 2021 series. I heard that there were some episodes over the summer, but
That's right.
I can't verify.
I was keeping everyone company over summer. We had some great episodes from our trip out along the Darling River and in the Pilliga. I think Chris might have been somewhere on the south coast sunning himself on a beach.
I was very unsafe, but yes, I was definitely on a beach. For those of you who haven't yet caught our podcast, you can jump on to Spotify or Apple and find the Voices for Nature podcast, which is just the collection of all of these episodes that you can listen to in the privacy of your own earbuds.
That's right, you can go and catch up at any time on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if you just search for Voices for Nature.
So who are we talking to tonight?
Yeah, tonight's episode I'm really excited about. We spoke with Catherine Cusack, who is a member of the Legislative Council of New South Wales Parliament. We went down to Parliament House last week and met with Catherine and had a really great chat with her.
Now, just for people who have been hiding under a rock, why is Catherine famous?
Yeah, so you might have heard of Catherine Cusack for the first time at the end of last year, which is the first time I'd heard of her, when she crossed the floor and voted against her party on the Local Land Services Amendment Bill and became a bit of a koala champion for many of us.
The chat we had was fantastic, wasn't it? I mean, she really was very open with us and shared a lot of the story and some of the sort of background to why she did what she did. I think we're really privileged to be able to have that conversation with Catherine. It's an incredibly brave thing that she did.
Oh, absolutely. And it was just really, really interesting to get a little bit of that behind the scenes around her decision-making process, how she came to that, why she did that. And one thing that I found really amazing about Catherine is that she's a phenomenal koala spotter.
Yeah, apparently. I think there's a lot of people online tonight who are looking to spot Catherine, including, I think there's a disproportionately large number of members of the New South Wales Parliament watching tonight. So
Perhaps.
If you're an MP, hi.
You can tune in
welcome,
2 weeks. Yes.
Welcome.
Please don't go anywhere.
Make sure you continue to fight for nature or stop ruining nature if that's more your jam. But we're very happy to have an audience from all over Australia and really all over the world who tune into the show tonight.
Yeah, that's right. And it's extremely timely, tonight's episode, talking to Catherine about koalas, because on Monday, Nature Conservation Council is launching a new campaign called Koalas Need Trees. And it is just that. It's all about protecting koala habitat across the state and ensuring that we don't go down the path of no return. The parliamentary inquiry at the end of last year found that koalas are on track for extinction by 2050 if we continue business as usual. So the campaign that we're launching on Monday is really all about protecting koala habitat and making sure that doesn't happen. And I think in the chat, if you have a look right now, we're posting a link so you can jump in and sign up when that link comes through to get involved, and we'll make sure that you're the first to hear all about our campaign when it launches on Monday.
And as ever, thank you so much to people who have already chipped in to support the work we do here at the Nature Conservation Council. We do rely entirely on your donations to be able to keep doing what we do. If you're able to chip in, we know money is tight, but if you can chip in, it really makes a big difference, because as we always say,
koalas grow on trees.
But money does not. So let's hear from Catherine Cusack. Well, we're here well and truly in the belly of the beast on level 11 at Parliament House in Macquarie Street with Catherine Cusack MLC, Koala Hero of 2020. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us on Cocktails, Controversy and Conservation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I think a lot of people who'll be watching this tonight would have seen what happened last year, and I think I speak for everybody when I say we were completely in awe and amazed by the events of that afternoon. But I think a lot of people perhaps don't know much about you and don't know sort of much prior to late last year. You've been in Parliament for quite a long time. How did you get here? What's your backstory? How did you get interested in some of these issues?
Look, I think part of my story that's relevant to all of this is that I grew up on a farm in southern New South Wales. which sadly has lost its koala population. So there were never koalas on our property, but we know that there were koalas there in the past. And, it was a cattle farm, proper farm. And my parents, I think, planted over 20,000 trees on the property, trying to revegetate to address all the salinity and the soil erosion programs going on there. And I guess that experience, well, first of all, I just adore our landscape, our Australian landscape. It is such a privilege to live in this country. And secondly, I grew up with my parents trying to reverse mistakes of the past. Willow trees planted on riverbanks that then have to be taken out. They, everyone, I think many of them well meant, but our understanding and our management of the landscape, it has never been great. And it's been very costly to agriculture as well as the environment. And I just feel passionately that we have a mutual obligation to get these things right, to stop repeating the mistakes of the past, but do everything we can not to make more mistakes. I would agree with the body of thought that we've just reached a tipping point and it's not an option to keep making more mistakes. And I guess that's why I thought that legislation was so serious. I could understand the politics behind it. Politics in all parties and in life has become very transactional. It's a deal. This is what you get if I get that. And that's just not a model that's going to deliver the right outcome for conservation in this state. So, yeah, that was the big one, and I just felt no alternative. I also felt that the public's voice was not being heard in the debate. I think members in opposition and other speakers were putting that case really strongly, but somehow as a government we were trying to jump over that. And if there was any issue that you can't jump over, such important passion that the community had, this was a big mistake. And I consider, and I said this to my colleagues, I consider I did them a big favour by stopping this. I feel I did the Parliament a favour, but I also feel I served the government well by stopping that legislation, because it was a mistake.
I think you did do everybody a favour. I think we all agree with that, and I think probably gave us a fair bit more hope in the parliamentary process. Tell us a bit about, you've been in Parliament for how many years now?
Oh, since 2003.
So
yeah.
a real veteran of the Parliament. What have you? What's that experience been like for you? How did you decide to move into Parliament, and what was that experience?
I should
like?
mention that I did as a student. We were briefly at university together. The reason I didn't initially complete my degree was because Tim Moore, who was then Shadow Minister for Environment in the Greiner opposition, asked me to come and work for him.
Right.
It was actually a job creation scheme during a big unemployment crisis experienced in Australia, but I think it was $15,000 a year, which Tim described as an honorarium, but was a fortune for
big
me.
Money.
So I just dumped the university,
or whatever, yeah.
Came in and did that. And Tim's an amazing man, and I know, and I hope well remembered and regarded by the environment movement. He changed many things, and he changed the policy dynamic in our organisations. He worked really well with the National Party. There was a much stronger partnership there. And in government, some great reforms. So I didn't actually work for him in government, but I was definitely involved in that. And that's where I met Jeff Angel and Total Environment Centre.
Who's probably watching tonight.
Well, some of these people I have they're giants. I've admired them all my life. I get the newsletters, I read them. So yeah. I realise, there's been lots of stouches in politics, but there are many people in politics who are really just wanting to get the right outcome.
Yeah.
And the environment is obviously front and centre at the moment.
You mentioned you grew up on sort of in southern New South Wales. Can you tell us a bit about your connection to the North Coast and what happened when a freeway was sort of proposed and threatening koala habitat up there?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, I did. The reason I mentioned about growing up on a farm was in this debate with everybody I've been discussing with in the Nationals and the Liberals, I'm actually the only person who's got experience on a farm. And I just found that really disappointing.
Yeah, for the
I
national
didn't
party.
feel that there was credibility in the way farmers were being represented on this issue. I know farmers, but particularly, as you say, my husband worked in the Department of Health, and we moved up to the North Coast in the year 2000 for him to take up a position there. So I went up there, my boys were really little, and I think we lived in Alstonville at the time, and we just fell in love with the North Coast. I really knew nothing about it. I'd grown up on a property near Yass, in the exact opposite. The rainforest, the landscape, the coast, it was just a wonderful thing for our family, and almost like a second life for me, if I can put it like that. Very different. But the same thing, this privilege that you have. And on the North Coast, you know, if you go for a walk on the beach or you see someone you know, the standard greeting is, aren't we lucky to be here? And everybody just says that to each other repeatedly every day, day in, day out.
That's
People
gorgeous.
on the North Coast have this passion for their landscape and a responsibility to look after it. And I mean that people of all persuasions. It's a very unique area, and I'm very proud to belong to it. And I know how upset the community was about this legislation and how much they... The people who were giving the feedback are the people who have the koalas, which I found intriguing, because there was this mythology that this was Sydney trying to boss around the regions, and we don't want to be told by, you know, inner city, cafe-loving people what to do in the bush. And I just thought, that is just so not true about where this is all coming from. I don't know, all I could do was try and put those experiences of the feedback on the record in the Parliament. I know you guys had a lot to do with organising the...
Trying our best.
But I mean, look, can I just say, you're just empowering people to have a voice at a strategic time, and that is so important. It was a very influential factor, and I think, I mean, obviously my vote was a critical vote in that. But I also want you to remember there were many members of Parliament who spoke very well and with great passion on the issue as well. So if it wasn't for all of those people, my vote wouldn't have been a critical vote. So I think it needs to be kept in that context.
Yeah. And can you tell us a bit about
the proposal. The Ballina.
Yeah. Please, yeah.
Okay, so I had this experience not long after we'd won the election where I found out that... Look, I think I visited the Lismore Friends of the Koala, who are awesome.
We've got the Koala Hospital up there.
Yeah, and they took me down to the Blackwell Range to have a look at the koala colony and tell me that the Pacific Motorway, which we're really looking forward to the upgrade, but this route had been planned that was just, it was going to add 4 kilometres to the distance of the motorway. It was like it was swerving off the route in order to take out the koalas and then swerving back on again. It was just... It was amazing. They took me down to meet with the local community who, you know, their knowledge of the koalas, they're obviously rescuers as well. So it was a very moving experience, and they were just really... So we walked around. I'm actually, I don't know why, but I'm a bit of a rare person. I'm quite good at spotting koalas. I spotted one. I was in the car on the road. And,
we'll have to go for a bushwalk one day.
well, I think they only stopped the car out of politeness because it's impossible to spot a koala from a car, but actually I did it. So my credibility was big. But yeah, it was a no-brainer. So I then engaged with the consultation process about the route, because I was kind of didn't believe that would be selected given the sensitivity of that site. It's our last healthy colony that we have. And all of a sudden it was announced as the route. The local community, rightly or wrongly, believed that there were sort of some cane farming interests that were influential in the process, and that's why the route was, the koalas were going to cop it. Everybody was really upset about it. Ballina was represented at the time by Don Page. I remember trying to tell the National Party, you mustn't do this, you'll lose the seat at Ballina. It's the 21st century, we can't do this to our koalas. And I actually couldn't believe the thing got approved. And I became very disillusioned after that. And then I know that there was obviously the federal minister, I think was Greg Hunt at the time, needed to approve it. So I certainly made representations to him as well. And that process failed as well. And so I guess I lost faith in all of those processes. I find it, I have a lot of trouble with the government infrastructure projects not having to comply with the usual development processes. And my experience has been that many disasters actually have involved the motorway and government infrastructure projects. So all I can say is I had become disillusioned over a period of time. Then, of course, I did the koala inquiry that was chaired by Kate Bowman, and the same thing, the passion and the information and the expertise. And I learned a great deal from the evidence that was given, particularly in relation to genetic diversity. So I'd always understood that koalas need to, they need the corridors to move around. But the big point that I guess was new to me was the significance of being able to connect with other koala colonies. Otherwise, what we're going to be doing is saving these little, ring-fenced communities that would never get the opportunity to evolve. And like any species, they need to evolve, and they need the strongest to be able to. Yeah. So I mean, at so many levels, you just realise are we too late? That was my only concern.
Yeah.
Look, it's such an iconic species, and I will say to you, in opposition, I was the Shadow Minister for Environment, and I did the Coalition's environment policy for the 2011 election, and was able to put in a policy in relation to koalas, which I think surprised everybody because it wasn't being discussed. But I'd read the koala recovery program that the former Labor government had, which I guess was fine, but it was really old, and there were no outcomes and there was no accountability for it. So I just thought, I guess rather pragmatically, that if we can do things for the koalas, we can do things, what we do for the koalas is going to benefit all of the species because it's the same issue, but maybe it's been too complicated, maybe the argument as one big snowball argument is too hard to win, but if I can just focus on the koala, people will get that. And anything we do to help the koala is going to benefit the environment as a whole. So it just, to me, seemed to be a really fantastic way of trying to change the thinking. Anyway, history has shown that maybe that's... maybe I have been losing arguments in the forums. I've tried very hard to follow the processes correctly and been disappointed, but I think that it all culminated definitely that day when the Land Services Bill came up.
Just thinking about that day, I feel like there's a lot of kind of folklore around how political parties work and how Parliament works and what motivates members of Parliament to do certain things. And I think one of the things that, in my experience, is not quite accurate is the view that everybody just blindly follows their party and, whatever they're told to do, they go and do, which I know is not true, but...
it's definitely the perception, though.
It's definitely the perception, yeah. But I guess the other thing that I think maybe everybody didn't entirely appreciate last year was just how big a deal it is to cross the floor against your party, against your colleagues, against people who've probably been your personal friends for decades now. What was that like? Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, so for me, I'm in the Legislative Council, which means that I've been elected on a group ticket, and really, apart from my parents and people like that, I've been elected by Liberal voters, and the party pre-selecting me to that position is why I'm in Parliament. So I feel a great loyalty to the Liberal Party, and I am under no illusion that I'm in the Upper House for any reason other than the Liberal Party made that decision. So in fact, I'd never crossed the floor before, and I always imagined that before I crossed the floor, I would probably resign my seat if I found myself in that situation, which was obviously the thought and the conversation I was having beforehand, just privately. But it was obviously a huge issue for my conscience, but I really believed that this was not what Liberal voters wanted. I know that it's not what Liberal voters wanted, and the legislation had not been through the correct policy process. So it wasn't the bill that had been signed off by Cabinet, as I understood it. It had been changed and come from the Agriculture Minister's desk basically into the Parliament. Everybody knew that it had these problems that were going to be corrected. The amendments never came forward. I did see the draft amendments, but they weren't introduced. And I think I said in my speech several times, I can only go on what's on the table in front of me, because people trying to get me to vote for the bill. There was a lot of arm twisting going on, if I can just put it like that, and things that were said, and it was because of the Blackall range, the Wardell community. I just couldn't rely on that anymore. So yeah. So to me, the bill itself was not a legitimate bill, and I just didn't feel bound by the process. There were so many mistakes in the process, not just in the legislation, everything. And so I didn't feel an obligation to resign from anything, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I think I really tried for nearly 4 weeks to point out the errors, to engage people. And it wasn't able to get the traction it needed, because the bill was actually about solving the coalition difficulties. And so what I was trying to say was a complete ancillary to what the actual purpose of the bill was, which was to patch that problem up. Yeah. So that's how.
We'll cut this out if you don't want to answer it, but
yeah, sure.
how have you been what's the reaction been since then?
Oh, I was very upset, I think, as people could see, because choosing between your loyalty to your colleagues in your party and your kind of integrity, which is what this came down to me as a question of integrity. It's just been the one thing that I've said to them, I just can't give that up. I can give up a lot for politics, and I think everybody has to give to be in politics. Politics is not a game you go into and expect to win everything. And sometimes, if you only win a couple of things, that's been good enough. You have to, it gives you perspective. But your integrity, no, you can't. And they made me make that choice, so I was quite frankly very angry even to be in that position. I really wanted them to withdraw the bill. So it was, and I just went into this bubble during and after, to be honest with you. And then there were these messages that started coming in, and my community on the North Coast sent me some messages, and I had no I had no idea. The public reaction it was very humbling to me. I felt it was a bit undeserved, to be perfectly honest, because I just didn't really have any choice. It wasn't even a question of just being courageous or whatever. I just didn't have any choice on this matter. And I want to repeat that many, many people worked on this issue. And every one of my colleagues in the Upper House, whatever party they belonged to, who voted against this bill, their vote was one of the votes that made the difference.
Yeah, it's a very generous way of thinking about it as well.
Oh, I mean, it was... See, when you've actually been out there and met the people, when they've taken time off work or driven, as happens in the bush, for 3 or 4 hours to see or flown up or whatever, and then they're just giving you the facts and the information and just hoping that you're hearing them. And because often they've said that to politicians many times before, you can see they're very doubtful that this is making any difference, but they just feel this is all I can do is to try. Well, I have so much respect for that, and I feel very obligated by that. And I wonder if maybe some of the people dealing with this just haven't been exposed to the correct information or haven't wanted to hear it. I don't know what it is, but those people who are living in those communities with the koalas, working with them, the scientists, all of that information, it was 100% consistent. And you can't, in public policy, in any situation, in my opinion, that can't be traded away for anything, especially not peace between 2 bickering parties. Yeah, shameful, really.
Yeah. And being a koala spotter extraordinaire that you are, Catherine.
Yeah, that's what I want to be famous for, actually. Yeah.
What do you think is the way forward for koalas in New South Wales? Like, is it a piece of planning policy that, you know, all sides of politics can agree on? Or what you know, how do we sort of protect them?
I thought the SEP that was introduced, which I think disappointed a few people, they thought it was too soft. But I think that was the minimum thing, and I was devastated when that was repealed.
Yeah.
And people said, well, what did you expect? And I said, well, I can't believe that you would put that in force. And people's koala plans of management, some of them waiting for 7 years, not approved, of no effect, complete lack of clarity. I have no idea what's been going on in the window since that was repealed, but clearly that's what's occurred.
Yeah. And so to get that sort of clarity and to try and, you know, expedite some of those plans of management and those kinds of things, like, what do you think is required? Do we need some kind of bold action from the government, or what's the kind of...
Well, I think that the local councils should be, with the koala populations and the koala management plans, should be really asking the government for that to be endorsed, because as Liberals, we believe very passionately in empowering local communities. So this is why koala management plans have always been supported by us, because we understand its landscape. The koala doesn't realise it's travelling out of a state forest into private property, and the councils are the ones that are best placed to manage that. And we believe that, I mean, we've given councils responsibility for coastal protection policy, for a range of things. So, but at the moment they have the responsibility, but councils like Clarence in particular have told us it's just impossible to protect koala habitat, because all of our local species of trees where the koalas are living are not listed in the SEP. So, and here we have a list of 121 species, I think it was, that the scientists told us are the ones that need to be on the list, so that councils can say, particularly Clarence, where it's such a local group of species, they can give effect to the policies. And I just don't ever understand how you can get a red pen and cross any species off a list that the scientists have developed over a number of years. So, yeah, that whole thing, I mean, I think to say that was concerning would be an understatement. Yeah. So the credibility of the policy after that, to me, it just didn't really... and the attack on the SEP, which is really how this all started, was kind of very ill-informed. I thought it was very alarmist. And I come back to my own experience having grown up on a farm. I do not believe that's what farmers think. And in fact, in my experience, any farmer who discovers koalas on their property, it's a great thrill. Rush home, tell the kids, start Googling on the internet, what can we do? Often make contact with neighbours and want to be part. I mean, because they're proud Australians like all of the rest of us. That's my experience of farmers. Yeah. I think a problem with protection of koala habitat, which I've come to realise, is that it actually devalues the land value. Now, that's, when I say devalues the land property, it caps the value of the property. So what that means is that that property then becomes very attractive to somebody who wants to make a windfall profit. So if you've got a block of land with koala habitat on it and a farmer's selling it, or the farmer dies and the estate, which is often how they come onto the market, is being sold, by the executor, they're going to sell to the best price, obviously, and the more you're willing to do to harm the habitat, the more valuable that land is going to be for you. So actually, I'm not quite sure what the solution is to that, but in some senses our koala protection laws are almost creating an incentive for destruction. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is where the enforcement and compliance needs to be taken seriously, and that was another concerning aspect, that desktop studies for enforcement, councils not being able to access property to do the proper studies. We haven't got it right. So I believe, coming back to your question, I think the SEP needs to be reinstated. Yeah. I think the compliance needs to be much more convincing than it is at the moment. and it needs to be landscape-wide compliance. I do not agree, I guess, with the vision that private land is no longer regulated by planning, because that was really the agenda behind this bill, was to remove planning controls from private property and just have it all in a code of practice kind of attached to the Local Land Services Management Bill. This was much more than koalas. This was about wetlands. This was about the whole thing. So, you know, like, as I say, growing up in the land, I understand regulatory complexity and stupidity, and it drives people crazy, and we can't ignore that, because by ignoring that, we need to work better with those stakeholders to solve those legitimate problems.
Yeah, as you said about empowering local communities, like, I think that's, bang on.
But we need landscape-wide compliance, I believe, and it needs to be tough and convincing.
Yeah.
Now, Catherine, if we're obviously pre-recording this right
so you
now,
can
but
cut it to bits,
no, we probably won't. But ordinarily, on the Zoom, we'd be seeing people's comments and what people were asking and saying through the conversation. But I reckon I can take a pretty good guess that there's an awful lot of support for you and what you did last year and what you continue to do.
Very grateful. Saved me, really.
Well, I think
I was in such a bad place, and it just really lifted me up. I felt so grateful. Cannot thank people enough.
I think there's a lot of respect for what you've done in the conservation movement. So I think on behalf of everybody, I can say thank you. Thank you so much for what you've done and for what I'm sure you're going to keep doing while you're in this place. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks,
for the
Catherine.
chat. It's good.
So that was Catherine Cusack. I hope you all got as much out of that conversation with Catherine as Chris and I did. And judging by the conversation that was happening in the chat on Zoom, it was great to see that you were all very actively enjoying that conversation that we're having with Catherine. So thanks for joining us. And we're having a really good conversation there at the end about the way forward for koalas. It's something we think about a lot here at NCC. Obviously, we're deeply invested in the future of koalas. What are your thoughts, Chris? What do you reckon?
Well, I just think that in all of this debate, one of the things that we need to find a way to do is bring everybody who's got a stake in it together and find the common ground, and just, you know, farmers and conservationists and local government and scientists, and there's a bunch of people that have a really useful perspective, and I think we need to kind of come together and map a pathway forward that everybody can have some confidence in. You know, this shouldn't just be sort of a winner-takes-all kind of scenario. We need to protect koalas. We need to make sure they don't go extinct. We need to protect those species of trees. But there's a lot of flex around how you do it, what sort of legislative instrument do you use. The starting point, I think, is a bit of good faith and a bit of trust.
Yeah, that's it. And, you know, one of the things that Catherine mentioned there was the critical role that NCC played in her decision to cross the floor at the end of last year on the LS bill. It was nice to hear that, you know, she heard that grassroots pressure. She heard that the communities that she represents wanted her to stand up for koalas, which is why I'm really excited about this Koalas Need Trees campaign that we're about to launch on Monday.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that we didn't pay enough attention to back when Koala Gate was happening, because Catherine had taken that action in the Parliament, but, you know, within an hour of that happening, the government had set aside the new SEP, which really meant that the National Party got precisely what it wanted, which was to revert back to the old system. And we're only going to get the change we need if the government honours its commitment to either introduce a new SEP or some other mechanism to ensure that we're properly protecting koala habitat, which is why this campaign, I think, is so important. And apparently we've already had quite a few of you sign up to be part of it, and I think that's a good sign. I think there's a lot of passion around this, and I think we can do important work for protecting koalas.
Yeah, that's right, and that's the privilege of working at NCC, and the work that NCC does is that we get to take all the passion, all the enthusiasm and excitement out there for koalas and leverage that for political pressure so that we get actual outcomes. So if you didn't already sign up when we posted the link at the start of the talk this evening, the link is in the chat again. You can jump in there and you'll get front row seats for our campaign launch on Monday.
Yeah. Now, next time for cocktails, we're doing something a bit different.
That's right.
What are we doing?
Yeah, so in 2 weeks, we'll be in Parramatta. We'll be coming to you live from Parramatta, and Chris and I will be joined by a panel with 3 very special guests from Western Sydney, and we'll be talking all about the impacts of heat and the increase in heat waves that people across Western Sydney have been experiencing, obviously one of the impacts of climate change over the last few years.
Now, Jackie, you're one of these inner city, latte sipping, inner westy kind of types. Do you know where Parramatta is?
It's on the train line.
So next week, in a fortnight's time, we're going to be live from somewhere in Parramatta to talk to some great people about the work they're doing about the effects of climate change that are happening right now for people in suburban Sydney. When we finish this call, as usual, you're going to get redirected to our donations page. As we said at the start of the show, if you can at all chip in, please, even $5 makes a huge difference. And every dollar you give us, we try to spend thoughtfully and carefully on making things better for nature, for climate, for water, all these issues that we talk about on the show.
And we literally couldn't do the work without that support. It's because of generous supporters just like you that we're actually able to do this work.
Thanks so much for being with us. Have a really good night.
Thanks.